President Trump says the U.S. took out a major facility in the South American country. Here he is speaking to WABC Radio on Friday.
We just knocked out, I don't know if you read or you saw, they have a big plant, a big facility where they send where the ships come from. 2 nights ago, we knocked that out. So we hit them very hard. But drugs are down over 97%. Can you believe it?
The president didn't provide details about the strike. The Trump administration has been targeting drug boats in international waters, but this would mark the first time the U.S. military has struck a land target in Venezuela. Trump added during the interview that the Venezuelan regime sent millions of people from their jails to America. The Trump administration is tightening the net around Venezuela's oil exports. Joining us to discuss his new article for the Epoch Times is Kevin Stocklin, journalist and contributor to the Epoch Times. Okay, Kevin, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again. So in your article titled, "Why Trump is Taking the Fight to Venezuela's Doorstep," you noted that the Trump administration said Venezuela stole American property. So we can start there. Maybe you can speak to us about what kind of property and the amount that Venezuela took.
Hi, Don. Nice to see you. So typically when a huge reserve is discovered, whether it's in Venezuela or the Middle East, very often countries will contract with Western oil companies to come in and bring the technology, develop the drilling equipment, extracting, processing, etc. And so that was certainly the case in Venezuela going back about a century. And oil majors are saying that the value of what they've brought in terms of equipment and technology and capital expenditures is about $60 billion.
So what has been the impact of that on the U.S. Based on what you just talked about?
Well, on the one hand, Venezuela had been the largest importer of oil into the United States, and they were producing about 20% of what the U.S. imported. And to a very large extent, the refineries that were built, particularly along the Gulf Coast, were designed to handle the kind of heavy, sour crude that comes out of places like Venezuela. On the other hand, since 2007, when Venezuela nationalized the U.S. Property, we have developed fracking and become the largest producer of oil. However, the refineries are still largely built to be most efficient processing the kind of oil that's coming out of places like Venezuela.
That Venezuela's governing regime is illegitimate. So talk to us about that. What happened during Venezuela's 2024 presidential election and onwards?
Yeah, well, the communists have been running Venezuela for decades and have really driven the economy into the ground. And they had an election in 2024. All observers believed and reported that the opposition, gentleman Edmundo Gonzalez, had won the election over the current president, Nicolas Maduro. However, Maduro refused to cede power and used the security police that he controls to keep the presidency. And so for this reason, the Trump administration and many other world leaders and observers are saying that his presidency is not legitimate.
So, Kevin, in your article, you highlight that Venezuela is estimated to hold the world's largest oil reserves. What is the significance of that?
Yeah, so that amounts to about 300 billion barrels. It is the largest known reserve of oil, larger than Saudi Arabia, larger than any Middle Eastern country, and about 7 times the reserves of the United States. So Trump very much has a strategy of increasing energy production, particularly in the United States. And this opening up these oil reserves would allow not only the addition of that to production in the region, but also to allow it to go through U.S. refineries, which process this kind of oil much more efficiently than the light crude that comes out of fracking.
And you noted, Kevin, that Venezuela is a country wrecked by socialism. What does that look like for the average Venezuelan? How do they get there?
Yeah, so Venezuela, used to be the richest country in South America and in the top 20 richest countries in the world. Since being taken over by socialism under Hugo Chavez, they have seen their GDP decline by about 75% between 2014 and 2021. They now see about 70% of the country living in poverty. They've had millions of people flee the country as refugees. Hyperinflation is the norm, and many in the country are actually suffering from starvation as well.
And can we talk about China for a moment as well? What role does China play in this situation? How dependent is Venezuela on China?
Absolutely. Well, China currently takes about 80% of the oil exports from Venezuela. So Venezuela is under embargo from the United States. China is obviously violating that embargo. So about 80% of the oil coming out of Venezuela is now going to China. And China is very unhappy with the embargo that the United States has placed on Venezuela for obvious reasons. They have gone so far to say that Venezuela could be the next Vietnam for the United States.
Okay, just final question. What does the U.S. endgame look like for Venezuela?
Well, what Trump seems to be doing, obviously, he's very interested in increasing energy production, but seems to also be reestablishing what's called the Monroe Doctrine. And this was a doctrine that has existed for more than a century in the United States, and it basically establishes that North and South America are key zones of influence for the United States. Initially, it was to keep Europe out of there, but more recently, it appears that China has taken a very strong interest in the region as well. So I think Trump, on the one hand, would certainly like to get the U.S. oil majors repaid their investments that were seized by Venezuela without any compensation. But I think the big picture is not only increasing energy production, but also establishing U.S. sovereignty over the region.
Okay, Kevin, good to talk to you today, and Happy New Year.
Same to you, Don. Thank you.
President Trump says tariffs are creating great wealth and unprecedented national security for the United States. In a social media post on